Hello, everyone, and welcome to Back to School Night for Math 4. I'll be your host, Mr. Porter, as we go through how this class works and what to expect for this year. So, in case you didn't know what Math 4 was, it effectively is the second half of Algebra 2, taught at a more manageable pace, and there's some overlapping with Math 3, but for the most part, these are our main subjects right here. Graph analysis, complex numbers, dealing with square roots of negative numbers, geometric arithmetic sequences with exponential logarithms, polynomial and radical functions, and then trigonometry, which is always a favorite of the students, I'm sure, with the triangles and circles. Just to show you once again, like how this works, this is mostly for seniors, so I think you understand how everything works here, but this is effectively the last part of the math cycle of geometry and algebra spread throughout 3 years instead of just being 2 years. So it's for students who typically struggle with math, or maybe some of your children just had a rough year last year and they just need to take things at a slower pace this year to catch up. That is what Math 4 is for. This is the syllabus that I showed my students. For the most part, these supplies here, the biggest thing I want to focus on is please make sure that your child has a calculator for my class. I do have calculators to share, but they're not very good, and I would prefer that students practice with the calculator that they're going to use for quizzes and so on and so forth. Which brings me to the next point where we don't have tests in this class except for a final exam. What we do have are these quizzes, which are standard-based weekly quizzes called concept checks, and effectively they have different categories based on topics that we've gone over in math. The first one was on key features of graphs. The next one was domain and range. And students get a grade for each one based on how they do. And every time they attempt one, they have a chance of improving a previously poor grade. So if a student does badly on the concept check for like 1 week, but they do better in the next week, it'll replace the previous one instead of being a completely new grade. And the way things are graded for the most part, the lowest they can get is a 10 out of 20. But for the concept checks, they can't get 100% the very first time they take a new subject, a new concept effectively. They can only get a B, which represents them acing that topic once. The way they get an A is that if they show me mastery of the topic more than once. The difference between an A and a B is if they show they can retain the information, because sometimes students will ace a quiz and then like a week later they forget everything. So that's what the A is there to represent, that mastery of something more than once. And that kind of feels like a bit iffy for some students when they first take this, but the idea is that they get to keep on doing these over and over again and have a lot of opportunities to show their understanding and mastery of a topic. And after a bit, they get comfortable with this, and it really works out for them better than a normal quiz. This is something that I showed my students on the first day of class, where I show them how I give points. You'll see that most points come from concept checks. That's where the big points are going to come from. But there's also classwork and a final exam. There's a few things missing, right? Students mentioned that students were surprised to not see participation, because participation can tend to be a bit biased between teachers, and I've always had ways to I've always felt like, my perspective, like if students being productive is a little bit different from theirs. And also, it's just to be a little more straightforward and unbiased in that case. And another thing that students were surprised about is that homework isn't going to be worth points in this class. It's still going to be given. It's still going to be required. We're still be talking about it in class, but it's not going to be worth points. And I know it's always kind of like a scary thing for students when they first sense it. And some of their initial reaction might be, does that mean homework is optional? I don't like homework anyways. I won't do it now. The answer I always tell them is no, it's not. A lot of my students, in fact, almost all my students are seniors, and most of them are going to be going to college next year. Well, they will be getting assignments that aren't worth points, or they will be having to study and prepare for classes that aren't like going to directly influence their grades, but they'll still be showing like all the results of their hard work is shown in their quizzes and their concept checks and their exams, their midterms. So this is to slowly get them into that mindset. Now, the other criticism for this is that, a lot of students need that homework to buffer up their grade. And we do have some classwork points, but the homework isn't there anymore, right? So another thing that I've actually, used to compensate for that, first off, is the lowest a student can get in my class is a 50%. And the reason behind that is that now instead of there being, A is 10%, B is 10%, C 10%, D is 10%, and then F is like 60%. There's like 50 flavors of failure. Now it's more condensed, so it's all 10%. And some people immediately think, oh, does that mean that students usually fail now get a plus 50%? Like a student would get a 30, now they get an 80. That's not how it works mathematically. Typically, what happens is that now we have the students who usually just fail in the first like month or so, and they have to climb their way out of that hole. Instead of starting at a 0, they start at 50. And students who typically get Bs before are still getting their Bs. Students who get As typically get their As, and it does work out, and it does work out for them. I know that a lot of this is different from normal classes, and if you feel worried about this, there'll be contact information at the end of this video, so feel free to email me about any of your concerns. This is to show you an example of what students will see when they first come into class and how things are structured. I always have to have a warm-up on the board, and you'll notice that some of these problems right here aren't at the level of Math 4 and Algebra 2. They're a lot more basic, but the idea is to get them start thinking about things that are related to our major topic, and then being able to at least starting into math mode, and then we get to the actual topic, they'll be more comfortable with it. Speaking of the major math topic, you'll see that I have an aim at the very top. I always have an aim that tells the students what we're doing today. Mathematical notation, one of the ways to represent things on graphs is with inequalities. I also always like to have my agenda here, which lists out how my class is structured. You'll see that we always have a warm-up at the front. Then there's the homework review. We still go over the homework answers, which are right here. Students get to check their answers. And we still have a discussion and answer any questions. So students who do their homework definitely still have an advantage in this class. And then, of course, there's the actual, I might have a team building activity. And we're just still doing that for this first month. But then there's the actual lesson and some practice. And then I wrap things up with an exit ticket, which is just like a quick check-in to see how students are doing with a certain topic, if there's any things we have to cover for the next class. And then the most important part of this slide is I like to always have a joke of the day that brings some humor into my class. And the students always try to figure out what it is. So this one is, why don't fish like going near computers? And the answer was, because they're afraid of being stuck into internets. Boom. I get a couple chuckles out of the students every once in a while, but I do like my corny pun humor. Here's some contact information if you have any more questions. I recommend using the email instead of the phone. If you want to talk to me on the phone, it's just better to set up a time that works for both of us to talk anyways through the email, because the phone will just result in you leaving me a voicemail. And finally, if you're wondering how your students get more support, well, first off, there's my website that will lead you to the Google Classroom, and the students can always see what kind of a homework they have. I also always post any videos I make, which are from last year. I post notes, and I like to post PowerPoints of the lessons that students miss. So if they ever miss a day, they can get caught up on my Google Classroom. And of course, you can always come into Access, and I think you know what Access is for the most part, but Access, as a reminder, on Wednesdays and Thursdays, students will get a chance to go to whatever teacher they need for support. And if your child, I promise you, if your child is failing my class and they're not coming to Access, I'll give you a phone call. I do like to be on top of that and not wait till November or December to give you a heads up that, hey, your child needs a little more support. They should come to Access. Can you nudge them my way so I can give them that extra support? And once again, here's the contact information. Feel free to submit that information, and have a good day.